Good evening, everybody. Good evening to all those in India. Maybe good morning, good afternoon to others who may be in other parts of the world. So here we are at another session of the book club. And I'm so glad that Latika Padgaonkar, who is our presenter of the day, has chosen this book, 1984. And I cannot forget the way she said it to me. She said, you know, I want to do 1984. And I could see that the book, is so significant, so enormously relevant to be looked at again in this day and age, because when George Orwell wrote it in 1948 and published it in 1949, I think it was a very imaginatively constructed view of a universe which did not exist for sure, but in his imagination could exist sometime in the future. And the book stands like a warning to the human race that we should not let it go there. That should never be our reality. But I think most of you will agree that several aspects of that book touch us in the raw now, and they're a little too close for comfort. So this is a book that is certainly worth rereading and rethinking about and rediscussing. And no one can do it better than Latika. So over to you, Latika.
Thank you very much, Mohini, and good evening to all my friends and everyone who's found the time to join us. Very, very happy. I just want to begin by saying, and I'm going to plunge into the novel right away because there is so much to talk about. But when I told a couple of friends that I was going to do 1984, they may have read the book or may not have read the book. They said, oh, you mean 2022? So it obviously meant they knew something about the book, and they were drawing some parallels of some doomsday parallels, maybe between 1984 and 2022. So let me plunge into the book right away. I have a PowerPoint presentation which is in the hands of Tushar. Let us see the cover of the book. So Tushar, can we see the cover of the book? And it's important that you see the cover, because the cover and the way it's been designed will have something to say about what the book contains within it. Now, shall we come to the first page, please? This page. Okay. Now, 1984 is quite an extraordinary novel. If you look up 1984 on Google, it will say it's a dystopian novel. Now, I read the book when I was a young person. I don't know if, I think Mohini read it when she was young. Some of you may have read it. But the word dystopian is something that was not part of our vocabulary when we were young. We didn't know what it was. It wasn't used. Like some words, awesome. We never used the word awesome. We never used the word dystopian. But when I looked up the word dystopian, not now, but earlier, it says everything that is bad, everything that is unjust. Well, I would say that 1984 goes far beyond that. This book is astounding. It is terrifying. In many ways, it is even bone-chilling. It starts from the word go and ends when the last sentence is read. So that is how bone-chilling it can be. It is, in fact, an entirely new definition of the world, of humanity. It's a hyper-real world where reality is distorted, where government or state or party, whatever you call it, defines its own reality, where propaganda permeates the lives of people, where nothing is really depicted, but that nevertheless constitutes reality. It's very paradoxical. The novel doesn't require any interpretation. It speaks entirely for itself. But what an imagination George Orwell had. He wrote it in 1948, and he probably turned around 48 and made it 84. He constructed a world that was conceivable and yet inconceivable. So I asked myself, can a writer be so dark? Can he be so hopeless? Can he be so grim? And yet he makes you cling on to every word that he writes. Can a writer be so prescient? Can he have so much foresight way back in 1948 that what he wrote then can be relevant today? Can he compose an ideology Can he compose a society? Nay, can he compose a world that goes far beyond the worst dictatorship that man has seen? A society where man can live and not live. Can a man be wiped out? Can he be vaporized, as Orwell says, very eerily? Can the past, the present, and the future be wholly and totally controlled? And if it can be, towards what end? And then the question arises, what kind of world are we moving towards today? A world where agencies and technologies and high-tech devices can eavesdrop and see and spy, where our privacy is compromised, where you can say, oh, Siri, oh, Alexa, answer the following questions, and you have these machine-made voices which answer your questions. So 1984 is actually all about the dangers of a totalitarian regime. It is about an imagined future, way back in 1948. And that future, in that future, there was no such thing as truth. There was no such thing as lies. Lies could be truth, truth could be lies. The people are told what is the truth. And they are told what is not truth. And they jolly well believe it. And of course, we cannot forget that the novel was written after the Second World War, where Europe had seen the devastation which was caused both by fascism by Nazi Germany, as well as communism in Stalinist Russia. Orwell was socially and politically opposed to totalitarianism of any kind. Can we have the next slide, please? Okay, now his name actually, George Orwell's name was Eric Blair. I just want to point out a little mistake here. He was born in Bengal, but actually he was born in Bihar. He was born in a place called Motihari, not so far from Champaran, in 1903, and he died at a relatively young age of 46. He lived in India for a while, and then his father was a minor official in the Indian civil service. He stayed there with his father, and later on, he lived. The family at that time, when his father was in the Indian civil service, they were not very well off, and they lived in what he called an atmosphere of impoverished snobbery. They were English, but they were poor. Later, he went to boarding school in England, and he was distinguished from the other boys by both his poverty as well as his intellectual brilliance. Then it says here, as you read on the screen, he too joined the Imperial service. He was posted in Burma, but saw how the Burmese hated to be dominated by the British. And he himself was quite ashamed of being a police officer. He hated the chauvinism of his colleagues. He hated the dishonest social environment, the bourgeois lifestyle of his colleagues, and he even called himself an anarchist. Finally, he resigned from the service and he took to writing. Now, he wrote about 6 novels or so, and I think about 3 nonfiction. Some of his better known works are Down and Out in Paris and London. Now, Down and Out in Paris and London is not fiction. It is his travelogue through the poor, poverty-stricken areas of London and Paris. Then Animal Farm, very well known. I think you also know a very sort of famous quotation, all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. So his idea was to recreate a society which was egalitarian. It did not happen. Okay, next slide. Now, the protagonist of the story is a certain Winston Smith, and I'm going to follow the story the way it is in the book. He's a name called Winston Smith. And if you read the novel, you will see that every character who's introduced, and the characters are very few, every incident that happens in the novel serves a purpose. Nothing is there just for the sake of being there or for the sake of description or an aside. It is there because it has a role. It is so well thought out and so well constructed. Everything is written with a purpose. Everything adds up right away or sometime later, and everything is part of the bigger picture that George Orwell is painting. But of course, the story is much more than the story of Winston Smith alone. Winston Smith is about 39 years old. He was born around 1948. Now it's 1984. So he is about 39 or so. And the place that he lives in is London. but it's not called London. It's called Airstrip 1. It's a god-awful state. This description is, the state is, the dirtiness of the state, the dirt, the decrepit air atmosphere is both man-made and natural. He lives in a small flat, which is unkempt. He has a telescreen. There's a telescreen in every house. A telescreen is like a television screen. And if you are within its ambit, if you're within its fold of vision, it can track you in every way. It can track your voice. It can track your what you're doing, your voice, your gestures, absolutely everything. In fact, it is the eyes and ears of the government. So there's a telescreen in every house, and one in Winston Smith's house also. As you enter Winston Smith's building, there's a dirty smell of boiled cabbage and old rag mats. Everything is wretched, everything is dilapidated. Not just around Winston, but everywhere else. If you go into a shop to buy something, let us say you want to buy a razor, it is blunt. If you want to buy soap, it is coarse. If you want to take a lift, it doesn't work. Similarly, everything is in a state of non-work. When you step outside onto the roads, there is a poster everywhere you go. The poster is one of a 45-year-old man. He has a heavy black mustache, and I always think of Stalin, a heavy black mustache. It could be a bit of mustache of Hitler also. And he has a ruggedly handsome features. And his eyes are so painted in the poster that they seem to follow you, as it happens with many other pictures. They follow you wherever you go. If you go right, the eyes seem to follow you. If you turn left, the eyes seem to follow you. The picture is one of Big Brother. Big Brother is watching you. So this is really something taken from Stalinist Russia. Then sometimes we hear sounds of helicopters overhead. What are the helicopters overhead doing? They're actually police snooping at people through windows. But that doesn't matter too much to Winston. What matters to him is the thought police. We will come to that later. So as I said, there are telescreens in homes, there are telescreens outside. These telescreens can be dimmed, but they cannot be switched off. And they can pick up a whisper. Even if as long as you're in the field of vision, they can even pick up a whisper. So what do you see on the telescreens all the time? If you're there, they can take in what you are doing, but they're also giving you information. Now, what is happening on the telescreen? There's a constant babble. There's a constant babble of the production of wrought iron or pig iron, as they say. How important is that? They're talking about the 9th third-year plan. How important is that? There is another poster, apart from the Big Brother poster. It's called INGSOC. Now, INGSOC is a short form of English socialism. And English socialism is a word which is coined in a language called Newspeak. Newspeak is the official language of this country called Oceania. And the ordinary language is English. Now, Winston Smith has a painful ulcer just about above his ankle. It's important. He works in the record department of the Ministry of Truth, or in Newspeak, Mini-True. Now, this department deals with news, it deals with education, entertainment, fine arts, and his role, Winston Smith's role, is to correct and update information. The atmosphere in the office is quite suffocating, is quite frightening. There are no windows anywhere, hardly anyone speaks to anybody else. And around him, what he feels is despair, darkness and panic, fear, helplessness and restlessness. Next slide, please. Now, the state of Oceania has 3 slogans. We will talk about them in a little while, in a little bit of detail. War is peace, contradictory. Freedom is slavery, contradictory. Ignorance is strength, contradictory. There are also different ministries. There's a ministry of war. There's a ministry of peace, which deals with war. There's a ministry of love, which deals with law and order. There's a ministry of plenty, which deals with economic affairs. There's a ministry of truth, which is for setting the record straight, which is where Winston Smith works. Now, this Ministry of Truth or Mini-True has a kitchen, and everyone who works there in this Ministry of Truth takes food from the kitchen and sits in a canteen and has food there. The food is god-awful. The bread is black, and you're not even supposed to have all that bread that's given to you because you have to keep it for another time. You have to save it. You can't have it all. The rest of the food is tasteless. It is gluey. It is revolting to look at. There's also a bottle of colorless liquid, which is called Victory Gin. It is for anyone who wants gin. And it is sickly, it's oily, and it smells like nitric acid. Then there are also Victory cigarettes available for anyone who wants to smoke. The minute you touch a cigarette, all the tobacco falls out. At this point, Orwell introduces another character, a girl. A girl, she's about 27. He sees her in the hallway. She's good looking, she's shapely. But Winston Smith hates women, especially young women. They're bigoted, he thinks. They're spies, they're party members, or they're adherents to the party, which may have this party, we'll come to it. It has existed since the 60s at least, and now we're in 1984. She looks at him, and he's instantly terrorized. He thinks she might herself be a spy. So you see how everyone lives in a state of fear. Then every day on the screen, there is 2 minutes of hate. And what is this 2 minutes of hate all about? Which everybody, every single person, Oceania has to watch. This 2 minutes of hate on the telescreen is about a certain man called Goldstein. He's considered to be the biggest traitor to the country, the party, the state. The party says his teachings have led to crimes. By the way, there's only one party, and he's accused of sabotage. He's accused of conspiracy. He's accused of heresies. The ruling party says he's fled, but God knows where he's gone. There's a little background here. What is this party? Perhaps the party was in existence since 1948, but in the 1960s, there was a revolution. The revolution, it was a populist revolution. The people had revolted, but it was a failed revolution. This was followed by great purges in which the original leaders of the revolution were completely wiped out. One of the original leaders is supposed to have been Goldstein. So since that revolution, the failed revolution, after that, there's only one party which is in power and which is ruling Oceania. Now, when you see Goldstein on the TV screens, telescreens outside, they show him demanding peace and freedom. He says revolution has been betrayed, but one doesn't really know whether Goldstein is a real person or he's just an invention of the party for the sake of propaganda. But ordinary people happily accept that he's the wrong person. He's the one who is a saboteur. He's the one who conspired. So as they watch the screen, they become frenzied. And as more and more information about Goldstein is put out, they become more frenzied. They yell, they shout, they jump up and down, and they become completely uncontrollable. This is the normal people. And that exactly is how the state wants it. They want this uncontrollable frenzy in people. The party also says this Goldstein has established a brotherhood and a shadow army. And this, they're still working to overthrow the state, but nobody knows what the truth behind this is at all. The party also says that Goldstein has written a terrible book. It is called The Theory and Practice of Oligarchical Collectivism. It is referred to as the book. So the party says this is a horrible book. No one should read it. So much for the background. So that makes you understand what the telescreen is about, who Goldstein is. We don't know whether he's real or not, but he's castigated and condemned by the party all the time on telescreens. He is the target of the 2-minute hate. Little by little, can we go to the next? We realize and understand that Winston Smith himself is anti-party. At this point, one other person is introduced, O'Brien. Now, O'Brien is a burly man, a big man with specs. He's mentioned here. He's actually in the same department and same ministry as Winston himself. He's senior to Winston. But everyone watches the telescreen together when there's 2 minutes hate or a hate week. And while this is happening and everyone is watching the telescreen together in the office, Winston looks at O'Brien, who looks perfectly normal, but says, is he perhaps not as orthodox as he looks? So now the girl is also watching the telescreen. O'Brien is watching the telescreen. Winston is watching the telescreen. And while all the other people, the audience, jumps up and down with frenzy when some things are mentioned, these two also jump up and down with frenzy, and along with them, Winston does more or less the same things. There's high-pitched emotion. And all the staff is expressing this high-pitched emotion. But inside himself, Winston is not very sure. Does he like Big Brother? Does he not like Big Brother? Does he like Goldstein? Does he not like Goldstein? So all these emotions are going round and round in his mind. Suddenly he sees Goldstein taking off his glasses and cleaning them. And Winston says, I think I know. O'Brien is just like myself. He's like me. He is hiding something. Maybe he's anti-party, but he's not showing it. I think he's like me, but his face is totally inscrutable. So now we go back to Winston in his home. It's a pigeonhole. And suddenly the neighbor, Mrs. Parsons, knocks at his door. And she says, please help, please help. I have a blocked sink. Please help. So he goes to her and he sees that the sink is blocked. Her little flat is dirty, smelly, messy. There are 2 or 3 children and one has a toy pistol. Now, Winston helps her with the cleaning of the sink. The sink is repaired and Winston steps out. As he steps out, the children chase him down the corridor with a toy pistol. And they say to him, up with your hands, you're a traitor, you're a thought criminal, I will vaporize you. You are Goldstein. And then they shoot from a catapult and it hurts him. Not badly. They said, we will vaporize you. Now, vaporize you is a word that occurs repeatedly in this book. It means a person who's secretly murdered, who disappears from all records as if he never existed. And these are children of just 7, 8, or 9 years, and they know these words. They know these words. They know all the right words, so-called right words. So Mrs. Parsons, their mother, feels very bad. She says, oh, please do excuse their behavior. They're acting this way because I couldn't take them to see the hanging. They're disappointed. What hanging? Hanging which the state does publicly of people who they think are guilty of crime. And Winston ruminates on how horrible the kids are these days. They're ferocious, they're unloving, they're willing to betray their parents, they're willing to do anything. Then he turns to the telescreen. And suddenly there's news on the telescreen. Attention, everybody. Here's a news flash from Malabar. Our forces in South India have won a glorious victory. Great news also about the decimation of the enemy. Thousands of prisoners of war. And also the weekly ration of chocolate has gone down from 30 grams to 20 grams. That also happens in the same breath. So one day he's sitting in his office or maybe in his room and he's dreaming. And a man passes by in his dream and says, we shall meet in the place where there is no darkness. And he's sure it is O'Brien. He takes out his diary. He writes in his diary things against the party. He writes in his diary, down with Big Brother. After having scribbled all these things in the diary, he puts a little bit of white powder on one corner. And why does he do that? So that if the diary is ever found or shaken or moved or taken out, that powder will fall and he will know that someone has touched the diary because the dust has now fallen off. In between watching the telescreen in his house, he has memories of his own childhood, of his mother, of his sister, and sometimes of his own terrible behavior. He remembers once having had a quarrel with his mother, going out. By the time he comes home, his mother is dead. And not only does he see her corpse, but he sees rats all over her, on her face also. Then every morning, I just want to tell you, on the telescreen, there is compulsory exercise for everybody. A young woman trains a bunch of people, including Winston, and she barks and yells and shouts at them to do every exercise to perfection, whether you can do it or can't do it, whether you want to do it or you cannot do it. This also is part of the party discipline. Now, when he goes to the office, he sits at his table, and there are 3 orifices or holes. One is for speak right. This is also in Newspeak, the official language of Oceania. Speak right. This is a recording device. Please, can we have the next one? Okay. So this is it's a recording device, and it converts words into text. Then there is a memory hole for disposal of papers. Whatever you put into this memory hole goes straight to a furnace where everything is burnt and turns to ashes. And the third one is for newspapers. These newspapers come to you through via cylinders, rather, through pneumatic tubes. And his job is to rectify so-called mistakes and make the changes that the party wants him to make. I just want to say, pneumatic tubes, when I first went to Paris, when we wanted to send anything in a hurry from one part of Paris to another, we used to go to the nearest post office, and we used to send things in the pneumatic way. So that was prevalent even in 1970. Now, the party's instructions change all the time. Whatever is the latest alteration becomes the truth. The past is constantly updated to suit the needs of the moment, of the present. And this is done through papers, through pamphlets, through books, through figures that are put out. Any which way that you can inform the people, the latest is the truth. Everything else is black. For example, the Ministry of Truth, where Winston works, puts out figures of shoe production. They say shoe production has been very high in our state, but most people are barefoot. But the figures are the truth. It is not true that people are barefoot. The figures that shoe production is high is the truth. Sometimes there are no buttons or shoelaces or wool in the market. But my goodness, telescreen is telling you otherwise. The figures are very high of the production of wool and shoelaces and buttons. The Ministry of Truth not only reconstructs the past, but also gets the proletariat, or proles as they are called. They give the proletariat information and entertainment. So this is also the work of Ministry of Truth. And what is entertainment and information? Slogans, children's books, rubbishy newspapers that speak of sports, crime, astrology, pornography, and so on. Yet Winston Smith likes his works. It was simple, mostly, but it was also occasionally delicate when it came to forgery or rewriting reports on the orders of Big Brother. I referred earlier to public hangings, which Mrs. Parsons has spoken about. So used is the public to seeing hangings out in the open that one character called Symes, a very intelligent man, he has this to say about public executions. He says, I think it spoils it when they tie the feet of the man who's being executed. I like to see the man kicking. Above all, I like to see the tongue sticking out, all bright blue. That is what appeals to me. This is where the proletariat is. Symes is actually not really part of the proletariat. He is also with Winston, working now on the 11th edition of the Newspeak Dictionary. The dictionary aims at reducing the number of words in the language. And this Symes is an intelligent man. He finds this fascinating, this reduction of language to the bones. You don't need so many adjectives. You don't need so many adverbs. You don't even need so many nouns, say the people who are working on this dictionary. For instance, if you have the word good and you want to say something is not good, why use the word bad? That's an additional word. You use ungood. If you want to say something is excellent, why use the word excellent? Say double good. So actually what this dictionary is doing is shrinking man's vocabulary. And by shrinking man's vocabulary, they are narrowing it. They are actually narrowing the range of thought. There was something called thought crime. You thought something in your mind. But perhaps there'll be no thought crime in the future. Maybe there'll be no words left to even think of these things, even express these things, because maybe thought crime may not be there. Today, there's a slogan called freedom is slavery, but maybe this will also go in the future because there'll be no sense of freedom at all. It'll be abolished. So now you go back to the telescreen and there are more figures about the, the quantity of food that's being produced, clothes that are being made, houses, fuels, ships, helicopters, babies, all kinds of figures, most of them untrue. Now, while he's looking at this, the girl is looking at him quite intensely. And Winston is sweating. He's sweating, and it could be tantamount to a face crime, the expression that he has. Anything could give him away. Or maybe the batting of an eyelid, or the movement of an eyebrow, or an expression, or a twitch of the face. Anything could give him away. Even a subconscious look of anxiety. All this, when caught by the telescreen, was punishable. Once, many years ago, Winston, 9-10 years ago, he was a married man. Can we have the next slide, please? He was a married man. But sex in Oceania had to be joyless. That is how it was with his wife. She was a party member and she wanted joyless sex. He had thought her stupid. But party did not want its members to feel any pleasure. Marriage was there only to beget children. All this was ingrained into you from childhood. And Catherine, his wife, had never felt any pleasure in the sexual act. So they had divorced. There was also something called the Junior Anti-Sex League, which the party had made. And this was something that advocated celibacy for men and women until you got married and you begot children. Now the proletariat or the proles were a large part of the population. They grew up in gutters. They were married at 20. They were middle-aged at 30. By 60, they died. So what did all this amount to? Their life. Their life was full of heavy work, physical mainly, taking care of children, of homes, of gambling. This was their routine. No attempt was made by the party to indoctrinate them at all. Because once they were awakened to political feelings, then you could not control them. It was not desirable that they have these feelings. So the proles have no great intellect at all. They only have little grievances. So among them, there was criminality, there was theft, there was bandits, there were drugs, there was no morals, there was no puritanism. It was said that the proles and animals are free. Life for both was bare, dingy, and listless. So you see, proles had a life which was apparently free, but not really. And they could never move out of their whichever level they were at. Then the story flashes back to the 1960s, post the revolution, which was a failed revolution. The people had confessed to their crimes, those who had been caught. They were executed in public. There were 3 survivors, Jones, Rutherford, and Aronson. These 3 had confessed to their crimes. They had been reinstated into the party. They had been rearrested and they had been executed. Now I'm telling you all this because one day Winston Smith, quite by chance in his office, an old copy of the Times has been sent to him. And there's a picture of these 3 at a public function of these 3. How? He was told that they had been executed. How is it possible that they were there? Now, as he was reading, his face had to be expressionless. He could not show surprise. He could not show amazement because the telescreen was on. The telescreen could recognize heavy breathing, shallow breathing, short breaths. The only thing it could not recognize up to now was it could not control your heartbeat. If your heartbeat was strong, the telescreen could not control it. So one day he goes for a walk and the weather is nice and balmy and so on. And suddenly there are rocket bombs. This too is not unusual. The party never says it has launched these rocket bombs. They say probably Goldstein has done it. Now, Orwell tells us that when these rocket bombs are launched, houses are demolished, there are deaths, and it's as if it's just another unimportant political occurrence. He even, as he's walking, he sees a severed hand and he kicks it into the gutter and goes on. Life goes on as if nothing much had happened. Now, he walks into a junk shop. It's a dark and unattractive shop. And he sees the owner. Oh, wow, this old bent man, Mr. Charrington. Charrington recognizes him. Long ago, Winston had come to his shop and he found a lovely album, a keepsake album, and he had bought it. Now Charrington recognizes him. And Charrington says, now nothing really gets sold. The antique trade is over. What I have is now real junk. Winston walks around the shop. He finds a beautiful paperweight with a piece of coral inside it, and he buys it. Then the owner takes him upstairs and to show him more antique pieces, which is now junk really. He takes him to a room which is musty, which is damp, but there's a bed there, and there's an armchair, and there's a picture on the wall, but there's apparently no telescreen. So Winston just wanders around, and then he goes home. Next one, please. Next slide. So on his way home, he sees the girl again, and his heart turns to ice. Imagine an unknown girl actually stirring terror in your heart, in your mind. Is she a spy? Is she part of the thought police? All these thoughts run through his mind. Another day, Winston sees her in the office corridor. And as she comes near, she falls. He helps her get up. And as he helps her and holds her hand, she puts a piece of paper into his hand. Again, he's terrorized. Is she thought police again? When he goes to his office and he's alone, he unfolds the piece of paper and he's stunned beyond belief. What is written on it? I love you. He's absolutely stunned. And suddenly the desire to stay alive, he's full of that desire. But how does one connect with her? Perhaps in the canteen where everyone comes to have food. So one day he goes and sits at the same table as her, but they don't talk much. But under the breath, they speak and they say, okay, let's meet at Victory Square, where there will be big crowds and people won't see that we are together deliberately. There'll be so many people together. And why Victory Square? What's happening there? Well, Eurasian prisoners are being paraded. Eurasia is another part of the world which has now been defeated by Oceania. And the prisoners are being paraded. So everyone has to come out and applaud the victory of Oceania. The two of them meet there amidst a very big crowd. And she gives him instructions about how to meet in a place outside London. Take a train, get out of the train, go far, then there'll be a wood, go through the wood, go round and round, come to a certain grove, wait there. She tells him, come on Sunday. So he goes there, he waits, and she arrives, taking another route altogether. They sit down and they start talking. She's aware that there might be mics hidden here and there, but she thinks she's now in a place where there are no mics. So they start by talking, inane talk, small talk, and then they embrace. Her name is Julia, and she asks him what he thought of her before she gave him the note, I love you note. What did you think of me? Winston is very honest. He says, I hated the sight of you. I wanted to rape you. I wanted to murder you. 2 weeks ago, I thought seriously of smashing your head. I thought you had something to do with the thought police. Well, she says, I don't have anything to do with the thought police. I'm like you. I do voluntary work for Junior Anti-Sex League. I stay safe by playing along with the crowd all the time. If they jump, I jump. If they yell, I yell. I do exactly what is demanded of me. And suddenly I have to just take a little detour, and I have to mention this. There is a description of a thrush sitting on the branch of a tree. I thought of Hardy's lovely poem, The Darkling Thrush, but the thrush is so beautifully described. This is the one moment, this is the epitome of, beauty. The bird is the epitome of beauty, and this is the one moment of pure joy in the book. Now, the two of them end up making love. And he asks her, have you done this before? And she says, of course, hundreds of times, always with party members. Winston Smith is happy because this promiscuity with party members is not allowed. This cavorting with party members is not allowed. But when she says that she does it with party members, that means there is corruption in the highest places. The more men she had, the better, he thinks. She tells him, I love our lovemaking. Winston Smith is thrilled because, as I said, in Oceania, you could not have pure love or pure lust these days. No emotion was pure. Everything had to be mixed with fear and hatred. Their embrace had been a battle. The climax had been a victory. It was a blow struck against the party. It was a political act. Their lovemaking was a political act. Now he realizes that she tells him that she's 26 years old. She lives in a hostel. She works on the novel writing machines in the fiction department of the same ministry. She's involved in running a servicing machine, which is a tricky electric motor. She has no love of reading. She enjoys sports. Like Winston, she hates the party, but unlike him, she has no particular interest in party doctrine. He does. She does not. She has never heard of the Brotherhood. By sleeping with party members, she had broken all rules, but she had not rebelled against the party, and somehow she had stayed alive. She tells him that sex talks are dubbed into us from school days. She knows the party's position. Now, this is very, very interesting. Sex instinct created a world of its own, which was outside the party's control and which had to be destroyed if possible. She advances very clever and very well-crafted arguments. She says, the more important, the heavier the sexual deprivation or inadequacy, the more it suits the party. Why? Why? Look at this crazy logic. Because sexual deprivation, if you're deprived, it induces hysteria. And hysteria was desirable because it could be transformed into war fever. She says, when you make love, you're using up energy, and afterwards you feel happy. You don't give a damn about anything else. But as far as the party goes, it cannot bear you to feel this way. Party men want you to be bursting with energy all the time, but not because they want you to do it, bursting with energy for their own ends. She says all this marching up and down and cheering when you see Eurasian prisoners being paraded and waving flags, it's only sex gone sour. If you're happy inside yourself, why would you get excited about Big Brother, the 3-year plans, the 2-minute hate, and all the rest of that bloody rot? Why would you be interested? You've had sex, you'd be happy. So there is a connection between chastity and political orthodoxy. You are chaste because you're orthodox. For how could, she asks, how could the fear, the hatred, the lunatic credulity which the party needed in its members be kept at the right pitch, except by bottling down some powerful instinct? and using it as a driving force. I hope you've been able to understand this. This hatred and this fear which the party wants to induce in the people, it should be kept at the right pitch. And to keep it at the right pitch, you should be denied sex. You should be deprived of sex. And the deprivation will give you the energy and you will use it to your own ends. She says you cannot abolish the family. Indeed, people were encouraged to have more children, to be fond of their children, almost in an old-fashioned way. But the children, on the other hand, were systematically turned against the parents and taught to spy on them. Which such thoughts and exchanges, the two lovers know that from the moment you declare war on the party, you're nothing but a corpse. We are the dead, says Winston Smith. We are not dead yet, says Julia. So such exchanges happen when they actually meet for the first time. They're described in the novel. Everything that happens, as I said, has a purpose. The introduction of Charrington, the introduction of Symes, the man who wants to see public hangings, the parson's lady and their children, everything has a person. Nothing is there simply by the way. Now, a little while later, what Winston does is he goes through the shop that Charrington has, that antique shop or the junk shop now, and he rents the room which is upstairs. He knows that this is pure folly. Outside in the courtyard, he hears a fat woman hanging out clothes. She's definitely a prole, and she's seeing the most stupid things, and she's putting clothes out to dry. And this is stuff that had been given by the music department, and she's singing that in an absolutely ordinary way. Once Julia gets him, Winston, pure sugar, which is a replacement for the awful saccharin that is normally used. She gets him white bread, which is different from dark bread, jam, milk, real tea, and coffee, all inner party stuff. So there is clearly corruption at the highest level. Inner party members are the ones who have this. All proletarian or outer party members have none of this. They eat all the gluey, dark, dismal stuff. So she has got all this from her party members, and this stuff is not available to others. Once she even does things like put on lipstick, powder, rouge, perfume. She wants to be a woman, not just a party comrade, always in overalls, because everyone in the party at all times had to wear overalls. One day, now next slide, please. One day he finds that the name of Syme is missing on the notice board. Everyone's name is there on the notice board, but not his. Now Syme is that intelligent man who works on the Newspeak dictionary and who had said, I'd love to see the public hangings and the tongue sticking out and so on. Now, he was a great supporter of the party, but why is his name not there? Was he just too bright? If his name is missing, it means something. Has he been killed? Has he been vaporized? Who knows? Winston Smith is very, very uneasy. Now begin preparation, not for 2 minutes hate, which is a daily thing, but a hate week, which happens occasionally. So what does hate week mean? You work overtime, there are processions, there are meetings, there are military parades, there are lectures, there are film shows, there are effigies, there are rumors, propaganda, atrocity pamphlets, and so on. There are also at the same time rocket bombs, more rocket bombs. One bomb, in fact, falls on a crowded theater and thousands of people die. One bomb also falls on a playground where children are playing. That too kills children. And the party says this is at the instance of Goldstein, who is the traitor. Now this hate week, people are told we are at war with East Asia. Really? Up to now, people have thought it was Eurasia. How come suddenly it's changed to East Asia? Never mind. We say we have always been at war with East Asia, and that is the truth. Finished. But Winston and Julia are seeing each other. They're eating better. They have no appetite for the horrible victory gin. They've even gained weight, and they have a kind of zest for life. And Julia says that perhaps there's no war at all. Perhaps the government is just firing bombs to keep people frightened. She says, do you realize that the past, starting from yesterday, has been abolished? If it survives anywhere, it's in a few solid objects like that paperweight with a coral bit inside. That's the only thing from the past. We know nothing about the past. We know nothing about the revolution. We know nothing about the purges, nothing at all. Every record has been destroyed. Every record has been falsified. Every book has been rewritten. Every painting has been repainted. Every statue or street, every building has been renamed. History has stopped. Nothing exists except an endless present. She says all this, but she's not really interested. She's not interested in party doctrine. And he says, oh, really? You know everything, but you're a rebel only from waist downwards. So, in a way, the worldview of the party has imposed itself successfully on the people who are shown as incapable of understanding that worldview. The party has a worldview. That worldview has been imposed on people, but people don't know anything. They just accept it. They are made to accept the most flagrant violations of reality because they never fully grasped what that reality was in the first place. And that is how they stayed sane. Can any irony be more bitter than this? The proles are not really so loyal to the party. They are only loyal to each other. They get whipped up when the party asks them to get whipped up. Otherwise, there's nothing. So Winston Smith and Julia know that once you're caught and you're tortured, and once you confess, you're shot. But they both feel that the party cannot get inside you. They can't get into your heart. They can do anything else. They decide to go to O'Brien, the man who's superior to them in hierarchy, in the office. They go to him. He belongs to the anti-party brotherhood, which is supposed to have been put together and established by Goldstein. And they tell him they want to join the anti-party brotherhood. What is known about the brotherhood? Nothing. O'Brien asks them questions. Are you willing to give up your lives? Are you willing to murder, sabotage, betray, blackmail, throw acid on a child's face, lose your identity? Are you willing to commit suicide? The two of them say yes, 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 yes to everything. O'Brien seems to understand. Then he says, are you ready never to see each other again? No, says Julia. No, never. O'Brien understands that also. He says, I will give you the book written by Goldstein. The Brotherhood is not an organization in the real sense of the word. Members, he says, don't know each other. We have no friends in the Brotherhood. There's no encouragement. If caught by the party, they will give you no help. You have to get used to living without results, without hope. Nothing may change in the foreseeable future. We are the dead, but we can spread knowledge and awareness individually. Then he gives them wine and he gives them 2 tablets so that when they step out of his office and go down the corridor, their mouths will not smell of wine. Indeed, he gives them the book, The Theory and Practice of Oligarchical Collectivism by Goldstein. So now we come to the book. Shall we go to the next one, please? Okay. So this is a book within the book. The first chapter is Ignorance is Strength. So now Winston Smith and Julia are in the room upstairs, Charrington's junk shop, and he's reading from the book. And he reads out to the chapter to Julia. Mankind's essential social structure, he says, has always been 3-tiered: high, middle, and low. The objectives of the 3 are very different. They're irreconcilable. The high want to remain high. The middle want to change places with the high. They want to go up. They talk about equality, justice, freedom, but if they ever reach the higher plane, they become tyrants themselves. The low, or the proletariat, if they have any aim at all, because they're so crushed by work all the time, they practically have no aim, is to abolish every distinction and create a society where everyone is equal. That seems to be like a Stalinist idea. But this never happens. We never create a society which is, in spite of revolutions, such revolutions are cyclical. They happen and happen again, but they never achieve their aim. To some extent, technical and scientific progress has made a little bit of equality possible, only to some degree, not more. Orwell gives us a vast and detailed account of what led to the present condition. Earlier tyrannies could not control people in the way present tyrannies can. Present tyrannies, you have technical help. every citizen could be perennially watched. And we, as we have this possibility today also, of being watched. As you know, you're constantly getting messages about, your data and your bank and your account and your card and all kinds of things. Now, the party is quite stratified, very rigidly stratified. There's no movement among groups. At the top, you have BB, Big Brother. He's all powerful. He's infallible. No one has seen him. You've only seen him in posters and you've heard his voice on the telescreen, but no one has seen him. He may never die. He's the focus of reverence, of love. He's the focus of fear also. Then there's the inner party. The inner party has about 6 million people. That's about 2% of the population. They're the brain of the party. Then you have the outer party, the hands of the party. They may be 12, 13% of the population. And then you have 85% of the people who are the proletariat or the proles. The structure, this 3-tiered structure, is not hereditary. You can appear for an exam at the age of 16 if you want to be the brain of the party. If you pass that exam, you will be taken into the inner party. So it's not hereditary. It's not based on blood or anything. Inner party members and outer party members are carefully watched at all times by the thought police. As I said earlier, the language of Oceania, the normal language, the common language is English, but the lingua, the official language is Newspeak. Since childhood, Newspeak words are dinned into you. Crime stop, double think, black white. They make people unwilling or unable to think too deeply on any subject at all. The party also wants people not to have any emotion. So, as I said, there's a frenzy of hatred against enemies. There can be a frenzy of triumph when there's some victories announced, and they have to sort of abase themselves before the wisdom and the power of the party. If the party says something is black, it is, and when it's obviously white, no, you must say it's black, and you must believe it. If Eurasia is today's enemy, it must always have been. If tomorrow party says it's East Asia, well then rewrite it, alter history. Next one. All this is important, as I say here, for the stability of the regime. May I continue? I still have a little more to go. Yeah?
Please go ahead.
Okay. Now, war is peace, it says.
Can I change the slide?
Next one. Yes, please, next. Okay. Now, war is peace, and this is divided into 3 superstates. Oceania, which constitutes Americas, the 2 Americas, South Africa, and Australasia. That means the Australia, New Zealand, and so on. Then there is East Asia. East Asia is China, Japan, Korea, Tibet, and so on. And then there is Eurasia. Eurasia is Northern Europe, much of Europe, and North Asia, northern part of Asia. There is also quadrilateral. Well, a quadrilateral looks more like a parallelogram, which is not part of any of these 3 states. That goes from Tangiers in the north in Morocco down to Brazzaville in Congo. To the right, it goes up to Hong Kong and Darwin. This area doesn't belong to any of the 3 states that are part of this story. These 3 states are always, we are told, at war with each other. Not bloodthirsty wars, but there's often rape and looting or killing of children. Apparently not too many casualties, but one never really knows where the fighting happens. It's never decisive. We don't know where the boundaries are, and all 3 sides appear to be evenly matched. So what are they fighting about if they're so far from each other? This quadrilateral that I talked to you about, the labor that is possible there for you to get to do work in your own country, and the resources that this quadrilateral might have. So quadrilateral, which I said is part of Asia and part of the Middle East and North Africa. They are fighting for that, but one never really knows. Where are they fighting? One doesn't know. Who is fighting Oceania, when it is America, North and South, and Australia? Where are they fighting? One never knows. War, why are they fighting? What is the object? I said one is labor and resources. The other is to be in a better position to wage another war. That is it. So on the one hand, you try to conquer the world, but this cannot be done. You want to root out all independent thought. through a study of facial expressions, gestures, voice tones, therapy, hypnosis, and so on, and to keep the social structure intact. By having war constantly, war practically ceases to exist. There seems to be no difference between war and peace. War is happening. You don't know anything about it. You as a proletarian, you are not affected by it. Hence, war is peace. Look at the paradox. It comes true. Strangely, the inner party members who know exactly how to rule, they are so far from the proletarian, they are so far from the people that they have not the slightest idea of what is happening in the country. But they know how to whip up frenzy in people. Why all this? Why? He's reading out all this from the book to Julia, who's lying on the bed. He calls out to her. He says, "We are the dead." She says, "We are the dead." "You are the dead," says a voice, an iron voice from behind the picture that is hanging on the wall. And behind the picture is a telescreen. And suddenly, all of a sudden, the entire atmosphere changes. There are boots in the courtyard. Scores of people walk in. They're kicked. They're the two, Julia and Winston. They're kicked. They're punched. They're in agonizing pain. And then who enters? Charrington, the owner of the shop where they had hired that room. He's old, yes, but he's smarter. Maybe he's also part of the thought police. So now we come to the last chapter, more or less. Winston Smith and Julia are now in prison. They are separated in different cells. There's no food given to them. They are screaming and groveling in pain. They're in intense pain, in intense agony. And who enters the jail cell? Parsons. You remember Mrs. Parsons, whose children had been taught all these words, and they had even called Winston Smith names and called him, "You'll be vaporized." But Parsons, the father, enters. He's a proletarian. Why has he come here? It's unbelievable. He has been caught for thought crime. And what is his thought crime? He says, down with Big Brother in his sleep, and his little daughter has denounced him to the party. So he has come here. Now, to stress how the conditions are awful in prison, Orwell says that Parsons used a lavatory pan in the cell, and it gave out the biggest stink. And then there is a woman, a shriveled woman, who's begging for mercy, and she's taken to room 101. It makes me think of suddenly something I heard this morning on television about Iran, that where people are being taken to room 103 in the Iranian prisons. And then begins a nightmare of pain for Winston Smith. The whack of a truncheon on his elbow, and he might as well be half dead. Nothing as bad as pain. There are boots and rods and fists and beatings on all parts of the body, sometimes 10 to 12 hours at a stretch, humiliating both body and mind. And at such times, you can confess to anything: sabotage, sedition, embezzlement, murder. You can denounce anyone you're asked to denounce. Says, in the face of pain, there can be no heroes. When you are in such pain, you give up. Then his tormentor. Can I have the next screen, please? Yeah. O'Brien comes in. O'Brien, the man who was part of the anti-party brotherhood. Winston is absolutely shocked. He says, "What are you doing here?" And O'Brien says, "I've been watching you for 7 years. Now is the turning point. I will make you perfect. We will meet in a place where there is no darkness," as he had said earlier, as Winston had thought. Winston Smith is flat on his back, immobilized. He is now already being tortured. Now he's being tortured by O'Brien. O'Brien has a lever in his hand, and he has a dial. And he presses the lever. And there's a shot of intense pain that swims through Winston's body. And as he presses on the dial more and more, the dial goes up 30, 40, 50. Numbers increase. And O'Brien says, "I'm taking trouble with you because you're worth it. You know what you're suffering from? You're mentally deranged, and you have a defective memory. You can't remember events. You persuade yourself that events have occurred. You are deranged. present, past, present memory, obliteration are all what the party says, not what you say. He says, for instance, here, how many fingers? And Winston says, gasping with pain as the dial moves, he says, 4. 4, says O'Brien. 5. So again, in great agony, he says, how 5? I see only 4. 4, 4, 4. How can you say 5 when I say 4? O'Brien says, no, sometimes it's 5, sometimes it's 3. Try harder. And then so hard is the pressing of that lever that Winston Smith begins to have visions. His head spins. He's ready to do anything, say anything. Then he's injected with something. He feels calm. He feels a love for O'Brien. O'Brien says, why did we bring you here? Winston says, to make me confess? To punish me? No, says O'Brien, not to punish you, to cure you, to make you sane. We don't care about your actions. We only care about your thoughts. In the Middle Ages, he says, heretics were persecuted and killed because they were unrepentant. And when they died, they became martyrs. We don't want that. We don't want our people to become martyrs. Hitler and Communist Russia, well, what did they do with their victims? They abused them. They confessed the victims, but the confession was under torture. We don't want that. Here, you will confess. We want confessions to be true. You will surrender, not because of negative obedience. You will surrender of your own free will. We do not destroy the lunatic. We will convert you. We capture his inner mind. We will capture your inner mind. And we will bring you to our side before we kill you. We will make his brain perfect before we blow it out. Everything is dead inside you. You will feel nothing. You will not feel love or joy of living or friendship or laughter or curiosity, nothing. We will squeeze you out completely. And then we will fill you with ourselves. Suddenly there's an apparatus behind Winston's head, and that acts, and there's a huge explosion and a flash of light, and something happens inside his head. And then he realizes that what O'Brien had said had become the absolute truth. So O'Brien says, ask any question you want now. Winston says, what did you do with Julia? O'Brien says, she betrayed you. Now for all her folly and her rebellion, everything that she had in her has been burnt out. We have made her into a perfect being. This has been a perfect conversion. Winston says, does Big Brother exist? O'Brien says, yes. Winston says, like I exist? O'Brien says, you don't exist. You don't exist at all. Winston says, will Big Brother die? O'Brien says, no. Does the Brotherhood exist? Asks Winston. O'Brien says, you'll never know. What is room 101? You know. Everyone knows, says O'Brien. So O'Brien says there are 3 stages in your reintegrating into the party. The first is the learning stage, then is the understanding stage, and third is the acceptance stage. At this moment, while all this is happening, Winston is lying on his back. His head is in a machine, and the dial and lever are in the hands of O'Brien. Now it is a little less severe. O'Brien says, do you know I collaborated in writing Goldstein's book? Who knows whether he's telling the truth or not? He says, the program that it puts forth is nonsense. All this growing enlightenment among the proletarian revolution, the overthrow of the party. None of this is going to happen in the next million years. The proles will never revolt. Why? Because we, the party, we cling to power. Go on, ask any further question you want, Winston. Winston says, do you cling to power for your own good? O'Brien pushes the lever. No, we cling to power. We seek power for its own sake. And what he says is cynically beyond measure. Not because we are interested in the good of others. We only want pure power. We don't want luxury. We don't want life of happiness. Power is the means to everything. It is an end in itself. Power is collective. So if an individual can escape his identity, if he can merge with the collective, like the party is the collective. You will be like the party. You will be all powerful. The party is not interested in what happens in matter. It only is interested in the mind. Only is interested in the power over the mind, not over matter. We can change the laws of the universe. We can change reality. We can change nature. We can do anything. Obviously, O'Brien has an answer to everything. He says, for instance, if we say the sun goes around the earth, that's the truth. If we say that biologists and archaeologists have found bones and all that, and we say that is nonsense, that's the truth. If we say the moon goes around the earth, the sun, sorry, the moon goes around the sun, what am I saying? Center of the universe is the moon, that will be the truth. Our mathematicians, our scientists can say stars are near, or they can say stars are far. It depends on what you want to be the truth at a given moment. Winston says, but that is doublethink. O'Brien says, how does a man exercise power over another man? Winston says, by making him suffer. O'Brien says, exactly. By tearing the human mind to bits and reforming it in a new shape. Not the old ideas of love and peace and forgiveness, but hatred, fear, pain, and rage. Strangely, the more powerful the party, it should be, knowing it's more powerful, it can be lenient, but no, it becomes less tolerant. If the opposition is weak, the party becomes more despotic. Winston says it's not possible to found a civilization created on hatred and cruelty. It's not possible, it will not endure. O'Brien says, rubbish. You think hatred is more exhausting than love? No, hatred is not more exhausting than love. And even if it is, so what? It's not important. Do you consider yourself morally superior to us? Winston says yes. O'Brien asks Winston to stand up, naked. Winston is frightened. By now, his head is bald, his nose is crooked, his cheekbones are all battered, his spine is curved, his chest is hollow, he's lost 19 or 32 teeth, or whatever, he's lost 25 kg. And as he stands up, one loose tooth is also wrenched out by O'Brien. Now, Winston Smith feels so much pity for himself that he bursts into tears. O'Brien says, we have degraded you completely. And Winston says, Julia, oh Julia, I still love you. And then he thinks to himself, I have not betrayed Julia. I've given away every secret of mine which has been asked, but I have not betrayed Julia. So O'Brien says, what do you think of Big Brother? Winston says, I hate him. Good, says O'Brien. The time has come for you to take the last step. You must love Big Brother, not just obey him. Take him to room 101. So you come to 101. You don't know, I don't know how to describe it also. But suffice it to say that what an individual fears the most in his life is what he faces in room 101. In the case of Winston, it is rats. He'd already seen rats devouring his mother's face. There is mention of rats every now and again in the course of the story. Big, burly, vicious, famished, kind of carnivorous rats. And they're in a box, in a cage, and the cage is held above his head. And they're just waiting to open the door of the cage. And the rats are ready to shred him to pieces. And he sees this, the thing he's most frightened of, the uncontrollable tremors. And a kind of madness takes hold of him. His bowels also turn to water. He goes through it all, he cracks. And then he collapses. He can't go on. He says, do it to Julia, not to me. I don't care what you do to her. Don't do it to me. The last thing that he was clinging on to, his love for Julia, in the face of rats, which is what he is most afraid of, he has collapsed. The cage door is shut, the rats are taken away. He is out now. We don't know how long he spent in the jail, whether it's a few months or a few years, we don't know. Maybe just a few weeks. He's better, he's fatter, he's stronger, he's all bathed, he's got clean overalls, he's got new dentures, new medicine for his ulcer. He even has happy dreams. He has begun exercising willingly with the telescreen. He begins to understand. The thought police had watched him very closely over 7 years. Every act of his, every thought, every twitch of his eye had been monitored. He could not fight the party. The party was right. How could a normal man fight an immortal collective brain? The party is an immortal collective brain. How can you fight an immortal collective brain? You're just one man. He begins to accept everything. Past was alterable, but it had never been altered. Oceania was always at war with Eurasia, or maybe with East Asia. The photo of those 3 men was never there. Just surrender. Everything else follows. How easy. He sits in his favorite cafe called Chestnut Tree Cafe. He drinks that disgusting Victory gin. The waiter comes and pours Victory gin every time he sees the glass empty. He now has money. He has a job. On the telescreen, there's the usual stuff. Eurasia is at war with Oceania is at war with Eurasia. It's at war with East Asia and so on. Third-year plan for bootlaces has been more than filled. He starts writing on the dusty table with his fingers. 2 + 2 = 5. He has seen Julia in a park. They're not strangers, but now the party is not interested. They say the two have been completely altered. There's no danger even if they meet. They have been transformed completely. She tells him she has betrayed him. She says, I was so threatened. I was so frightened for my own self that I betrayed you. And he says, I too betrayed you because I had rats in front of me above my head. But they no longer feel the same way towards each other. She goes off to catch her tube, her metro, whatever, and he returns to the Victory gin, which has now for him become life, death, and resurrection. Later he goes to the office and does some unimportant work. He's part of a committee and so on. He goes back to playing cards, playing chess and so on. And suddenly there is a trumpet call from the telescreen. Victory! There's great excitement and cheer. And the voice says, this has been a vast strategic maneuver, a perfect coordination, enemy utterly routed, 500,000 prisoners. Winston Smith finds himself cheering, jumping up and down with the crowds as he looks at Big Brother's portrait. And I'm now quoting, quote, he gazed up at the enormous face. 40 years it had taken him to learn what kind of smile was hidden behind that dark moustache. Oh, cruel, mindless, needless misunderstanding. Oh, stubborn, self-willed exile and from the loving breast. 2 gin-scented tears trickled down the sides of his nose. But it was all right. Everything was all right. The struggle was finished. He had won the victory over himself. He loved Big Brother. He was no longer an individual. The end of quote. He was no longer a thinking individual. He was only now a puppet of the party, a brainwashed man. And he will probably be happy forever, whatever that may mean. So 1984, it gives us a sustained sort of build-up. It moves to what I would call an absolutely terrifying climax. And then there is a kind of a resolution or a denouement where you achieve a supposedly lasting peace. The style of writing of George Orwell in this book is straightforward. It is sarcastic. It is bitter. It is even vitriolic at times. The characterization is as according to the need of the story. So can we say that this is the most pessimistic and unhopeful picture of the world? Can we say that this terrifying novel, this very unsettling novel, is utterly astounding novel? It's a novel where I would say philosophy engages with morality. It engages with the nature of truth. It engages with language, and it engages with the idea of what it means to be human. And so I think the question can be asked, is 1984 life denying? And thereby, is it also art denying, literature denying? Thank you for your patience to hear this very long.
Thank you very much. I think you have done a fantastic explanation of this book. You know, I always thought this was a kind of a prediction, just a or the thing, and just a warning. But it seems to be that it has really come true. And when you read it first time and you hear it again and again and see what's happening, you keep on comparing what 1984 or what was it, 28 or something he wrote it for was, and what it is 2022.
Yeah.
Oh, you worry.
You do worry.
Come on.
You do worry.
And, when you're describing the jail, that cell that he has, well, I'm going to write a story on that. I won't tell you that now.
Okay.
Anyway, coming back, guys, I think Latika has done a wonderful job.
Really, fantastic.
Very well processed. Do not be shy. Be ready to ask questions. Mohini, take over. But I request you all, Prashant Sinha, Maruk, Tushar, Nikhil, everyone, General Patankar, you also, please open up, control, start your video, start your sound. Everyone, please do it. Okay?
Yes, Latika, excellent, absolutely excellent, as I knew it would be. That cartoon that you showed, George
The last
Orwell.
one, I don't know, was it was shown by Farooq, the last cartoon of George Orwell?
1 minute.
The last page.
I'll just put it up.
Yeah.
Because you didn't ask me to move the
Brilliant.
slide, no? So
Yeah, I forgot the last one. This is the
This
one.
one. This is it. Yeah.
Yes,
Absolutely
exactly.
perfect, yes.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
That hits the nail on the head.
Yes, it does.
absolutely. Yes, that it says it all. It says it all. And it is so demoralizing, to realize that so many things that he talked about, which when we read it as young people, were pure fantasy,
Absolutely, they were fantasy.
imagination. And whoever thought that these things would happen or come so close to happening that we're seriously worried about it. So Aruna put in the chat that she's glad she read it when she was young and resilient, because it would be hard. I so totally agree. It would be hard to read it today. It would hurt so much, to read it now. Yes, please, everybody, weigh in.
General Patankar, you're there for the first time. We would like to hear your comments. General Patankar, can you hear me? We want to hear your comments.
Everybody, please put on your video screens.
We would like to see your face. And
he's there. Yeah.
And when you speak, please unmute.
okay. Let me have, I think
there.
Prashant is there.
Yes,
please
Prashant
go
is
ahead.
also there.
Yeah, I just have a couple of comments, very minor comments. One is that it was meant to be a warning in 1948. The idea was, if you don't take care, if you are not careful, if you don't guard against these things, this is what the world will be like. And I'm glad in some ways the world took the warning. And the second point is that the name is quite significant. Winston is the same as Winston Churchill, the English leader, and Smith, of course, is a common man. So it's a very interesting combination of the wartime leader and, of course, a common Englishman.
I thought it was common, but I didn't think of Winston in terms of Churchill. I hadn't thought about that. Yeah.
Okay, General Patankar, I think you have something to say. Now, go ahead. Welcome.
Please unmute yourself. General Patankar, we can't hear you. Can you unmute, please?
He's unmuted, but we cannot hear him.
Oh.
Come closer.
We can't hear you at all.
Patankar, we cannot hear you.
Yeah, we can't hear you, General Patankar. We see this.
Okay, I think the sign says it all. Okay.
Okay. How about John? Is there John Kurian? Why don't you switch on and talk to us?
Well, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, clearly.
Maybe you can't see me, but you can hear me.
No, I can see you.
Yeah.
There's a
We can
yellow.
see you well enough.
I just read it recently, all right, and I read it when I was young. And I read it recently. I'm sorry. I mean, of course, if you can see parallels to various things happening right now, but the main source of difference right now, which Orwell couldn't predict, is that there is no government over here which can totally control thought, and that is because of we may not like it, because the omnipresence of social media. So now you have various sources of information cannot be controlled, even in Iran, even in China, even in Russia. There are sources of information that cannot be controlled. And that's
They're trying to control them.
I know
think
they
they're
are, but
trying
but that's impossible. That's the beauty of technology. All right. And so this is where we need to be very careful. And all this business of information, etc., is a warning to us that these are things which can happen despite everything. So
I'm going to ask Sanjay Saxena to give his talk, and after that Gautam is
I
there,
think
and then
you can continue.
John, you want to continue?
No, I
Sorry.
don't really. It's more or less the same. But I only think that we should worry. There are things to do, but
John, on the other hand,
countervailing forces.
you are right about social media and so on to an extent, because one thing is, I need to tell you that where I have friends in Iran, they have not been able to access any of the mails that I send them, nor WhatsApp. Finally, one person did write to me to say that we have no internet and we can't access. Secondly, I also wish to say that we have no privacy now, not only because of social media, but also because of the kind of hacking that goes on into everything that we are and we possess. So very often you find that you're not in control of your own life because so much is known about you. I'm not saying they know every twitch of your eyebrow or of your cheek, but they do know a lot about you, and you seem to get such messages all the time saying, be careful, don't open this, don't open that, because they're hacking this, hacking that, and hacking does happen. So there are ways of getting to know information about people, which under ordinary circumstances you would not have known.
I think I'll get Sanjay Saxena to take up the case. After Sanjay, it's Gautam, then Eraj Bharucha. This time all the guys are in the forefront.
Sanjay, unmute yourself.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Very clearly.
Yeah, okay. So, of course, it was a wonderful presentation. I really liked the way she treated the subject. I think excellent. Couldn't possibly have been better. Really wonderful. That's one. The other thing is, this is a book I read a long time ago when I was in college, and it made a lot of sense then. But with the wisdom of hindsight, now that so many years later, one has to acknowledge that totalitarianism is not entirely without its uses. No, the first point that I would like to make is, you see, we had this very foul chap called Saddam Hussein, who was a complete dictator, and he did bad things to his people, using chemical weapons on those who rebelled, etc. And so we thought we would make life there better by bringing in democracy, and we'll remove this guy, and all good things will follow. But we know that the consequences were not entirely satisfactory. That is one. Secondly, we saw in the Arab Spring, for instance, Gaddafi was another person who was, who again, he shot airplanes over Scotland and whatnot in midair. But at the same time, people in Libya would probably be nostalgic about those days when Gaddafi was ruling, because what we have now there is complete chaos. The other thing is that, consider, for instance, a country like China, which again, individual liberty is not their strong suit, and they do bad things to people in Tibet and in Xinjiang. But we have to put this against the fact that they brought 340 million people out of abject poverty in less than a generation. I think that's a great triumph. And so there has, of course, way back in 1948, when George Orwell wrote this book, the world was a very different place. And my submission is, and this is a little controversial, that that the white man simply cannot appreciate the cultural complexities which characterize rest of the world. So in societies which are deeply divided on the lines of tribe, race, religion, caste, etc., you do need a certain amount of force to keep order. If you don't have that, then you could have chaos and anarchy. Okay, so think about that. Thanks.
Respond, Latika, respond.
I would just say that, yes, thank you for those comments. While I do agree that two countries that you mentioned, both Libya and Iraq, had dictators, and the idea of overthrowing them was the right one, and having democracy was the right one, it didn't get there. The idea of overthrowing them was probably correct, but they did not. Is it because of their culture? Is it because of their political culture? I cannot say. They did not arrive at the kind of society they would have wanted to. As far as China is concerned, I don't know more than you. I think I only understand what is happening to the Uyghurs from newspapers and television. Nothing more. I haven't read any books on this. But it's actually, the idea seems to be, from what I hear, is sinifying these Uyghurs. The Uyghurs are not Hans. So you are sinifying them by changing their language also, changing the way they live, changing the kind of food they eat, not just the ideology. So it's on several levels. And can we say that because they got 350 million people out of poverty, you should put another few million into the most abject kind of dustbin, which is what we are shown on TV. I don't know how, we only see what BBC gives us and the channels like that. We don't know what the Chinese channels are showing. The Chinese channels are showing probably these people as really jumping up and down with happiness. I don't know.
Okay.
No, I take your point. I take your point. But all I'm saying is that we need to appreciate that culturally heterogeneous societies are complex and that there are deep fault lines, and those need to be managed, and that sometimes requires the use of force. That's a limited point I'm making.
Okay, I'll just quickly say one thing
Move
here.
on then.
May I? Just one sentence, Satish, that
Okay,
it's
go ahead.
okay to think of a benevolent dictator. But unfortunately, as George Orwell himself has shown in Animal Farm, dictators do not stay benevolent. Power goes to their heads. Okay, that's all I want.
Very, very true. Gautam, your take, and then NH's take, and then we speak.
Well, it's disconcerting that we are dependent on telescreens, and that all of you right now are able to watch me growing bald. It's very disconcerting. The second point is that my existence and my relevance ka aadhar is dependent on set of numerals. And the third is that Eric Blair, or rather George Orwell, was born in Motihari, district Champaran. And there was this guy, a chap called Mohandas Karamchand, who started and initiated civil disobedience from that very place.
Yeah.
I thought maybe what Sanjay Saxena just now spoke about, we have the alternate civil disobedience, the chance or the prospect to go against the totalitarian environment which he seems to encourage. That's it.
Right. Gautam, I think you said it very well. Whether it really exists, what you're talking about 1984, it really exists in 2022 is what I feel. We are going more and more towards it. I agree with you, Gautam. And imagine, you and I agreeing so quickly. All okay, NH, you are next.
Two very basic things that quite shocked me actually, and some little subsidiary things which I'd like to talk about. One is that, yes, I found it extremely disturbing, and I could draw parallels with what we are going through today. But the other was a surprise, and that Orwell could look at this in 1948, when things are so different in my young days, and bring out these things about sort of unrealism run by an unscrupulous governance, a disturbed world, an unstable world, an unsustainable world from the environmental point of view. And don't we have an option as human society, or has always had options, of looking for a more equitable, peaceful world? And what would take us there? And I think that is something that's a thought that is left after hearing this story, which is quite a remarkable story. And how these flights of imagination can take us into visualizing scenarios which are so unique, which is some part of the human mind. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just, I think
Please.
because George Orwell, since that little bio note that we put up on the screen showed that he was against totalitarianism of any kind, and that in that sense he was a renegade. He was someone who opted for socialism, democratic socialism. He didn't find it in the two major powers where a lot of lives were lost. I think millions of people died in Russia, both in the First and the Second World War. And then you had Stalin there, and you had the Gulag. So a dictator went to war against another dictator, and yet he had a Gulag where he killed off many people. The same way you have of Hitler. So either it's concentration camp here or Gulag there. So with the world he knew, of course he knew India also, but otherwise it was basically, the war in Europe. It didn't seem to give him any hope. So this does not take us towards hope, which is where we should go. This leaves us on a pessimistic note. A man is conquered. He's conquered by pain. I don't know. And then he is happy, whatever happiness may mean. But I'm just wondering, I haven't recently read Brave New World. And I think it might be that in Brave New World, Aldous Huxley speaks about finally, or maybe Aldous Huxley commented on this book in 1984, that why use force? Why use torture and violence? Use love to convert. Whether that can happen or not, one doesn't know.
Love is all we want. That's it. That's what I think. Who says about love is all we want more? Which poet? Which song? I've forgotten now. Wispy, your turn. I can't hear you. Switch on.
Yeah, I was just trying to unmute.
Okay.
Yeah, I think what we get from what George Orwell has shown in such a graphic manner is the danger that if we live in a world where we cannot trust anybody, that neighbors distrust each other, that children turn against parents. And I think this, the country we are living in, where we had so much hope of, a better way of life. Look at what is happening. Any voice of contradiction is being silenced, is being threatened, so that those in power can do what they want. And I think Orwell predicted that, and I am really sorry to see that things seem to be going in that direction in this country where we'd hoped for better things. Every day you read about the enforcement directorate, the CID barging in, getting hold of people. I mean, maybe there may be some iota of truth in, there's corruption, we know, in all these big places, but a voice of anyone daring to speak against those in power is being silenced. And that I find the most frightening thing. And I think we have to somehow remain alert about this. Those of us who have been teachers, I think we owe it to our students to persuade them to think for themselves, not to be carried away with this sort of mass hysteria that, I'm sorry, just one minute. मैं बाद में फोन करके मीटिंग में हूँ.
I don't know how to send it.
That is, sorry, that was an interruption. I think we need to see the lessons that Orwell tried to give us so many, many years ago. And I think Latika's done
How do I send it? I
brilliant
need to
job
send it.
in bringing all this to the forefront once again. So thank you so much for today's session. I'm really
Right. Thank you, Vispi.
Vispi, thank you. Moini, take over.
No, can we speak to Nikhil Padgaonkar?
Where's
Would
Nikhil?
he like to say something?
Yeah, he's there.
Nikhil, would you like to unmute and say something?
There's someone
Okay.
called 608615.
There's
Nikhil
Uma
and
also.
I think Nikhil has gone. He doesn't seem to be there
Okay.
any longer.
Uma,
Yeah, he's gone.
Want to stop?
Nikhil is
I don't
there.
know how to get out.
Uma, are you
go
there?
ahead.
Yes, I'm there, and I really enjoyed the whole thing. I had read it long time back in my 20s, and I think I enjoyed it just like that, as a a kind of a reading something for fun, entertainment. But today I got to really understand the nuances and the way that prophetic insight. But the more I think about it, I feel that nothing much has really evolved with our human conditions. Maybe that kind of mentality was there in George Orwell, but today, don't you think that just about everywhere you have this kind of attitude, and people really don't want to comply with anything at all? And the best thing is to have a proper democracy where we can have lots of more protests and lots more going against all this authoritarianism.
And a strong opposition.
And
which can keep the
absolutely, I'm
government
just
in
waiting
place.
for the strong opposition.
Mo, take over.
Okay. Yes. So Latika, huge thank you to you. A huge thank you. I knew you would do a great job, and you have indeed. So this has been stimulating. It has reminded us of that great book that we read many, many years ago. We have realized how terribly and awfully relevant it is today. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
for
all of
those who attended.
those. Thank you all of you who participated, offered your opinion, joined in. Also the others who listened and I'm sure benefited from this discussion. Now, I'd just like to tell you what to expect next time. Next time is a fortnight later, on the 16th of October. Prashant Sinha will be talking about The Red and the Black, a novel by Stendhal. And Latika would be conducting that session, since Satish and I will be in the air. We'll be flying at that time. And by the way, I would like to invite others also to sometimes conduct sessions. You know, I mean, I have requested Latika once before. She's done it. Sunita has done it. I think Sheena has done it once. So if you would, if any of you feels that a book is up your street and you would like to be the one to conduct the session, please let us know in advance, and it can happen, right? Okay.
What about Gautam? Gautam's been with us for years. He should.
Gautam can also. I said, yeah, to everybody.
I'm a very shy
Whoever would
person.
like to.
I'm a
Whoever
very
would
shy
like.
person.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
We'll help you return. So we'll help you revise that.
okay, so thank you very much. And over to Farooq for the last word.
Yeah, and I would say, Latika, you have done a fantastic job this time.
Thank you.
All your nervousness came out in a beautiful presentation.
I wasn't nervous about the presentation. I was just nervous about getting the connection.
Anyway, so next Saturday, we have Hassan Abdullah bringing us a program on the environment. And the topic is global violence responsible for global warming? So it's going to be a very intense session, and I request all the people who have great process on the environment to be present. It's on Saturday at 7:30. As soon as we finish this program, I'll be sending you the invites for the next Saturday. So please, Hassan Abdullah is going to write a book on it. So before he presents the book, he's going to give us a presentation next Saturday at 7:30. So with this, with your permission, Satish, Mohini, Latika, can I end the program?
Yes, please. Thank you very much, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Everyone.
Good night.
Bye.
Have a lovely trip to Turkey.
Thank you.